grade reading among poor and minority students to first in the nation. First, 40th to first. You cannot argue with the results, ladies and gentlemen. They work. Education choice works when it's targeted at specific demographics. So Governor Lee has proposed two things, one of which is a charter authorizer, which would allow, which we already have, by the way, it's just now done through the State Board of Education. And he wants to create an independent board that will hear charter application appeals. The process now is, if someone wants to, a charter operator, and these are public charter schools, not private charters. If a charter applicant wants to open a charter school in Shelby County, they must go to the Shelby County School Board and apply. And then the Shelby County School Board can determine whether or not they want to authorize this charter to come into that system or not. Same thing in Davidson County and every other county. It's the same thing, that's the way it is right now in Williamson County. A charter applicant can come to the Williamson County School Board and apply for a charter application. If the local board denies that application, then currently, under current law, it goes to the state board, and the state board can overturn that decision. We're not really changing that process, but we are going to create an independent charter review board that will be solely authorized to review these appeals on application. And this board can overturn the decision of the local government, because what we find is the school systems where the charters are most needed are the ones most likely to deny the charter application. And that's why we have that process. Now, on ESAs. An ESA, an educational savings account, would say that if your child attends a school in a district that has 3 or more failing schools, and again, that's 5 school systems right now in the state of Tennessee, and I told you which ones those are, then you will be eligible for an education savings account for your child. That savings account will be funded with the BEP formula allocation that is allocated to your child. In Shelby County, that's about $12,000. Davidson County, it's about $11,000. That money will go into an educational savings account that the parent can then use for private school, tuition, after-school programs, whatever they think they need to best get the best education they can for a child. Here's what's unique, though. In Governor Lee's proposal, if that BEP money follows the child and goes into the education savings account, Governor Lee's going to replace the money for the school district. So if you live in Shelby County and your child leaves the Shelby County school system to go to a private school, and so the BEP money follows, Bill Lee's going to make that school system whole for 3 years. We're going to call it a transition period. So the school loses the child, doesn't have to provide a teacher, a desk, books, anything else for that child, but they get to keep the money for 3 years. One of the biggest arguments I hear from people opposed to vouchers or education savings accounts is, you're taking money away from public schools. No, we're not. They're getting more money on a per capita basis because they're keeping the money. If 100 kids leave that school system, they're going to get all that money put back in for 3 years. So don't give me an argument that this is taking money away from public schools, because it's not. Furthermore, excuse me, I'm over the cold now, but it's still residual in there a little bit. For these 5 school systems, which have those high concentration of failing schools, if you look at the numbers in Florida, it moves the needle. It moves the needle significantly. We've heard us talk about Tennessee as one of the fastest improving states in the nation, according to the National Assessment of Education Progress, and we are. We've made significant strides. But guess where that improvement is not happening? It's not happening with poor minority students in these inner city schools. So opponents of this say, I don't like vouchers. I don't want to do vouchers. Vouchers are bad for public education. What about the kid? I'm concerned about the kid, the child that is trapped in a failing school. His parents don't have the opportunity to improve that child's life and give them a chance at pursuing the American dream. So when I hear a school board in Williamson County passes a resolution opposing this initiative, do you understand the optics of that? We're the wealthiest, whitest county in the state, and we're saying we don't want to do something to help inner city kids who are poor and predominantly minority. Shame on you. Shame on you. This is a good proposal. It's a bold proposal. And let me add as well, Governor Lee's budget includes more new money for public education than any budget in the history of the state of Tennessee. $175 million new dollars, including $71 million for teacher pay raises for public school teachers. $25 million per year. The ESA program will start in 2021. $25 million a year to go into the ESA program to replace the money in these failing schools when kids leave to go to a private school. $40 million for educational safety to help, which Brandon has been a leader on. I can't tell you how committed this governor is not only to public education, but when our partnership between state and local government is failing those kids, it's not only our right to do something, it is our obligation. And if getting those kids out of those failing schools and into a private school will help them have an opportunity to go to college instead of going to prison, we should do it. We should absolutely do it. So I've said repeatedly, Williamson County has no failing schools, much less 3. So this doesn't affect Williamson County or Franklin Special. I've been criticized for saying, oh, I support vouchers as long as it doesn't affect Williamson County. That's not what I said. Williamson County doesn't have the need. We've got great public schools. But there are areas of our state where we don't, and these kids are trapped, and we should do something to help them. So I'm the proud, enthusiastic sponsor of this legislation. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it passes.
So, anybody had any doubt about how Jack stood on this issue? Just watch the reruns of this show.
Jack is a bashful guy. I've been trying to get him to come out of that shell for years, but
yeah, Mr. Speaker, you've been working really hard on this bill as well. Did Jack miss anything?
No, no. He said it very well, very passionately. For 8 years under Governor Haslam, we spent 1.3 billion. That's with a B, new dollars to public education, and it's raised the ship in a lot of school districts. But in the failing districts, it's not. And so Einstein defined lunacy as doing the same thing over and over. So let's quit just giving unlimited amount of money to the failing schools. Let's try something different. And this idea catches my attention. Let's take the kids out of the schools. Maybe the problem is the school, and it could be administrator, it could be environment, I don't know. But let's take those kids in failing schools, let's take them out and give them a relief raft, a vehicle to go to another school. And so we'll try this several years, and if this doesn't work, we'll try something else. But if you look at Florida and other states, this educational savings account has proven to be very effective. So let's try it and see what happens.
One question that I think is a fair question that the critics have raised is that they're afraid that the courts will come in and say, you've offered school choice in Nashville, you've offered it in Memphis, Jackson, Knoxville, Chattanooga, but my child wants school choice in Williamson County. And that the courts will come in and decide that, you know, we not only should have school choice in the failing districts, but in the other districts as well. Are there any constitutional concerns about that? Are there any legal concerns about that?
ESAs have been around for several years, and it hasn't happened to date. So logic would dictate that if no other state's been sued, Tennessee wouldn't be either. But more importantly, in foundation, when you make public policy, we're the legislative branch of government. You can't worry about what if, what could, what might happen. You can't worry about that. That's another branch of government. But based on what's not happened in the past and trying to do something to help these kids, I think we're very constitutionally sound.
Okay. Sam?
I'm
Brandon?
sorry, I don't have a microphone. Oh.
We can fix
and
that.
it didn't come through my committee. So, well, listen, I know where my senator and my speaker stand on this, and even though we may differ, I want to tell you, I firmly believe they are committed to our public schools and our public education. But I have a fundamental difference on the vouchers, okay? And it's based on my campaign that I started 3 years ago as a strong supporter of public education, and I'm not saying they're not in any way at all. And I firmly believe if a voucher ever hit Williamson County, they'll be the first two to fight that tooth and nail in Williamson County. But,
Unless Williamson County has failing schools.
and that ain't gonna
And
happen.
If we have failing schools in Williamson County, then
Right.
we would support it here.
So my issue comes down basically to an issue that what the unintended consequences. What kind of schools could we see opening in these districts? That are we ready for, say, a Branch Davidian school and what they promote, and then the courts force us to send taxpayers' dollars to those schools? It will be out of our hands. And I, as a taxpayer, I have a fundamental problem with that, and I've always have, and that's where I stand on this issue.
Brandon?
There's still work going on the bill itself. There's been some amendments, there's been some negotiations, some changes. I see it continually getting more palatable for where I'm at. I ran and love my public schools. I'm a product of public education, and first and foremost, I always want to see public money going to public education. However, there is some data, and there are some extremely failing districts that we need to look at. We need to strengthen up. And from a financial standpoint, and what I'm looking at on budget, sub, and full, to some degree, that's good money chasing bad. We've thrown a lot of money at those districts. We keep throwing money at those districts, and those schools are not improving. So regardless of where you're at on public, private, and how that money's distributed or what your preference is, those schools need to be fixed. Those districts need options, and we can't keep kicking the ball down the road. It's time to do something. I do trust my governor. I do trust my speaker. I do trust my leader, and they've been doing this. Well, these guys have. We've got a new governor. He's a freshman as well as I am, I would say. But I've talked to the governor several times. I was last night. I was actually over there, and I had a meeting yesterday with Dr. White, chairman of education. I will not be administratively killing any bill based on my preference and budget sub, because in that regard and where I'm at there, I'm looking at the financial ramifications of what that bill does. And when it has a funding letter from the governor, and it, unless I see some strong evidence in the next couple of weeks before it comes to my committee that it is intentionally harming public education, I most likely will let that go through and hit the floor, because education has spoke, the members have spoke, and I think it needs to be debated and hit the floor at this point. So unless I see some very strong data, unless it's amended and changed in a negative way, but the governor has been extremely gracious on funding public education. And specifically to the policy I've been working on, he's committed it's going to be $500 million over the next decade for school safety. It's $50 million a year with a local match for public safety. And that's something that a year ago, we didn't even know that we'd have $10 million in the budget next year. So, he's taken great strides to put our children first. And I trust that he's trying to do that. The policy behind that, the debate, we'll always have debates and won't agree on issues. But I believe his heart is in the right place. I believe he wants to help these children, and I look forward to seeing how this plays out. And I want to see those schools improve.
For anyone that really wants to see how this experiment has played out over a long period of time, you could look at the New Orleans public schools that are no longer run by the public. They're all run now by charter schools, and see how that played out. In effect, it did away with the public schools in the failing school district, but I think the results are positive for the kids. So you've got pros and cons there, but just appreciate your color on that, your background, and we will stay tuned and listen to how the debate continues. The Chamber Board voted recently to support 5 bills that are, I think, either going through or have gone through the legislative process here recently. Notably the historic tax credit, which Tennessee, I think, is one of the few states in the South here that has not had one. Now, Sam, I think you've been pretty heavily involved in the tax credit debate.
Yes, and my understanding that legislation faces a large fiscal note, so it's we'll have to come up with the funds that we can support the tax credit for preserving our historical buildings. I believe Kevin Bond out of Bartlett is carrying that legislation. There's probably no one better qualified to carry that than Kevin, but been talking to the local preservation community about that, but we do understand there is a fiscal note to that, and we'll have to come up with the funds to cover it.
We met Monday with all the parties, with the governor's folks on, looks like we've got the request down to about 15 million. We're looking to fund it. It's important to us in the House, it's important to the leader, it's important to the governor. So we support it, we just got to figure out how to make it work, and we're working on that.
The HOV enforcement, I didn't hear the debate in the chamber board meeting. I'd like to have heard that, so because I don't like HOV lanes personally, but the chamber is supporting the more vigorous enforcement of those HOV lanes so that transit and high occupancy vehicles can have an advantage getting back and forth in traffic. Where does that bill stand? Where does that effort stand?
I've got that bill. We're going to roll that to the second part of the 111th. It still needs some work, and it's going to take some work over the summer to be sure we get everything right with that. Sometimes when kind of keep your powder dry, we need to be sure this is right before we go and start lobbying and pushing something. To be sure we have the right support, specifically in transportation, and so we're still working on it. It's coming. You'll see some action on that soon, but we rolled that for now.
Right. When you say you roll something, explain what that means.
Oh. Well, there's multiple. You can roll heads, which is not good. You can amend your own bill 11th hour and have unintended consequences and do bad things, which I found out this week. Basically, that you're picking it up and you're not going to run it this session. You're going to work on it the second part of it. Yeah, that's the term I'm using.
Right.
I would like to say we addressed this in the last General Assembly, and what we found out there is serious concern for the safety of the troopers that have to pull people over during rush hour. A lot of places there's not a place to safely pull over a car, and then what you do, you create a bottleneck. It does impact federal funding, the enforcement rate and such, so there is a very complicated bill, and it's just not a simple answer of enforcing the HOV lane.
You know, right now, the $10 fine is in no way worth the risk of. In fact, there should be zero enforcement right now because that officer in no way should put himself or the occupant of that vehicle in risk for $10.
But there should be 100% compliance, so.
Okay. Jack?
I would just like to say a quick story. One of my buddies, he put his state license plate, house plate on, and he put his house number on there, and he drove in the HOV lane one morning, and guess what? He got about 3 calls.
What do you mean?
No. Other county.
All right.
I don't have house tax.
Convenient voting centers in Williamson County, the effort to make it possible for you to vote at any precinct in the county if you are registered in the county.
Yeah, that came to us from our county election commission. We did a pilot in Rutherford County last election, and was quite successful. People were watching to see how that worked, and now, so I filed a bill. I don't know if one of you guys have it on the House side, but we filed a bill to, at the request of our county election commission, to enable Williamson County to do convenience voting. As it turns out, there are a number of counties that want to do it. And so I think we're going to utilize, I think Shane Reeves may have a bill that will not only make it permanent in Rutherford County, but will add in some other counties that want to give it a try. And basically it just means, as you said, much like at early voting, you can go vote anywhere that early voting is available. You'd be able to do the same thing on election day. And so I think with the technology we have now to be able to monitor who's voted and who hasn't, we're able to do that, and we'll make it easier for people to vote on election day.
So I would not be able to just go from precinct to precinct to precinct and vote multiple times.
You could, you'd go to prison.
So,
Prison to prison.
just wanted to be sure. Williamson County looks like going to get a new judicial district. Is that, Sam's giving me the
We got a new judge, but I'll defer to the leader in the Senate on this one.
Yeah, I don't know why I would have any special interest in the judges in this area, but no, we did. Last year we were able to get a 5th judge, and it's something we've needed, and long, for full disclosure, my wife is one of our circuit court judges, but this has been going on long before she became a judge. When the 21st Judicial District was created, back in the 80s, it was 4 small rural counties. Williamson, Lewis, Hickman, and Perry counties made up that judicial district. Well, now it's 3 small rural counties in Williamson County. And so the caseload has obviously gone up exponentially in Williamson County. And so working with our colleagues that represent what we refer to them as the 3 western counties, they don't feel like they're getting, appropriate treatment because you've got 4 Williamson County judges. They don't think anyone from their area could ever get elected because Williamson County's got all the votes. And so we lobbied very hard to get a 5th judge, and we tried to make it so that that 5th judge had to come from those 3 counties. And that's what they want there, is to have a judge that will represent those 3 smaller counties. And then the 4 judges we have now will focus on Williamson County. And so we got the 5th judge, but we're running into some constitutional issues relative to a residency requirement and trying to make sure. Governor Haslam appointed a gentleman named Mike Spitzer, who is from Lewis County, from Hohenwald, and he is now that 5th judge, and he is servicing those 3 counties, and then the other 4 judges are serving Williamson. The problem is we have an election. He's got to run for the seat next year, and we're in a strange situation. Is we don't want anyone from Williamson County to run for and get elected to that seat. We want to keep it someone from those western counties. So there is discussion about making that 5th division its own judicial district. And those conversations are ongoing. It's not a done deal that we will get that new judicial district, but we are working on that. There's fiscal implications because they would have their own district attorney, they'd have their own public defender, and so there's a lot of consequences, things we have to think through. But that's kind of where we are on that.
Gotcha. That explains that. And I think, Jack, you're developing a bill for local education capital funding for high-growth districts like Williamson County that are having to build a lot of schools. Tell us about that and where we are.
Yeah, that's an ongoing effort, and something that our dear friend, the late Charles Sargent, was very passionate about, and we've worked on the last several years, and we continue to work on that. Williamson County does not get a fair shake relative to the BEP. There's no factor in that formula for growth, for high growth. And so we're working on it. Like historic tax credit, I don't think there's any objection to doing it, but it's got a sizable fiscal impact because it's not just Williamson County. There are a number of districts across the state that would qualify for this additional funding. We wouldn't do it through the BEP. We'd create a separate funding mechanism that would appropriate money based on growth and make it for capital projects and things like that, to build schools, basically. So we're working on it. But again, we've got a brand new governor. We've got a lot of things going on. We've got a lot of new House members. I'm hoping we can get something done this year. We've got to get to that final budget process and see where the money is and see if we can get some money appropriated. I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic it will happen this year. If it doesn't, then we'll certainly come back next year and it'll be our top priority.
Dave, I want to point out something, and I hope you all realize, or it's dawning on you, that when we talk about Tennessee and legislation, the General Assembly, the key role that these 3 play, if it has to do with legislation, not only the governor's agenda, but the point of center on all legislation, being the Senate Majority Leader, Jack's hand is on it. He's directing that. If you notice, when we talk about transportation issues, Sam's one of our chairmen of that committee. Transportation issues goes through his purview, and then Brandon is now on budget sub, and so he will be and is one of the leaders when it comes to finances and the budget, because everything in the state that has to do with finances goes through the subcommittee, which is the key component of finances through Brandon and Brandon's purview. So we're well positioned to not only help Williamson County, but to prosper the state. And the state is prospering very well. If you look at us, what we're doing economically in the fields of economics and job creation, growth of income, cost of living low, taxes low, the state of Tennessee is one of the tops in the nation. And so I'm proud. These three here are the driving engineers on that issue.
We're proud of our delegation. We appreciate all you're doing in all areas that we want you to help us with. Katie Beckett bill. Sam, you seem to be a little more familiar with that, or the rest of you maybe. I've talked to Sam a little bit about it. But
well, I tell you, this the Katie Beckett bill is named after a young lady back in the early 80s. She was born, and right after birth, she developed a severe brain infection. And so her parents had to have her hospitalized, and they exhausted all their funds. But as long as she was in an institution or a hospital, Medicaid would cover the cost of her care. And after 3 years in an institution, she was able to go home with and she still needed a lot of therapy and help with feeding and breathing treatments and such. But they found out if they took her home, regardless of their income, they would lose their Medicaid coverage. And so it was the government was forcing them to keep their child in an institution because of their income level, which it would be cheaper for her to receive the same services at home. So President Reagan got involved in 1981 as part of his Medicaid Reform Act, and he came up with a program where if a child, and we're talking about the most complex medical issues, severe disabilities. We're not talking about someone, say, like my granddaughter with Down syndrome. We're talking about the round-the-clock care. These children, if they can be served at home at a cheaper cost, regardless of the family income, they can receive Medicaid coverage. Right now in the state of Tennessee, to receive this coverage, you have to meet a lower income threshold, and you receive this coverage. But if you exceed the income threshold, that coverage is cut off. So you're talking about a family that's making maybe $120,000, $130,000 a year. They are being faced with a $200,000 a year Medicaid cost, and they're told either get a divorce, give up custody of your child, or quit your job, and you will get this care. And I tell you what, the speaker has stood up and he said, we are going to make this happen. And I've received widespread support from the Senate and from the House on this. It's made it through subcommittee, through full committee, and then we're going to tackle it in budget next. We've talked to the governor's staff, and it's amazing the bipartisan support on this. And so I've been blessed to carry this by the Disability Coalition. I call it coalition warfare because we got DIDS, the Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disability, on board with TennCare and the various agencies across the state to help push this. And if you want to see an emotional video, go back and watch the ending of each of the subcommittee and the full committee where we carry this in TennCare sub and insurance. And it will break your heart, but also it will give you hope for these families out there across our state. So, well, still got a fight to go, but I feel that with the bipartisan support and the support from our leadership, we're going to do something great for the families of Tennessee with those children with the most complex, serious medical conditions.
Let me add on to that. So the cost of this to the state, to us, to the taxpayers is $50 million. I think it's something we should do, but that's what we wrestle with every day is, and a good idea comes down and it has a cost of $50 million. And so you debate, okay, what do we cut, or what taxes do we raise? And so that is the debate that we have, is how do we come up with that kind of money, and where does it come from, and who pays for it? Because we have a balanced budget. And so because we have a balanced budget, we have very low taxes in the state, and we have a very low cost of living. Unlike Washington, D.C., which is about to run the country off on a cliff, the state is run very well. And so that's what we have to wrestle with every day. And Sam and Jack, and I know Brandon's involved too, we're proud to be leading that fight, because there's certain people that just can't take care of themselves. I have no problem spending the money for those.
Jack, how does that look in the Senate?
Exact same posture. It came out of committee the other day, unanimously, bipartisan, unanimously it did, but then it goes to the Finance Committee. So it's one of these issues. It's there's no debate that we need to do it. The issue is we have to sit down just like families and businesses do, and we've got all these priorities. We have, we have this much money, and we have this many needs, and so we have to sift through those. But I agree with Sam. I'm cautiously optimistic that we can do something on this, and people shouldn't be given an incentive to get a divorce. Which is one of the families testified. It was a family, and they had exhausted all of their resources, and literally they could get a divorce. This husband and wife could get a divorce, and then they would qualify, and they could get the in-home care, or they could institutionalize their child. And we shouldn't be putting families in that situation.
Very good. The governor outlined a few other priorities that I'd like to get through in the next 5 minutes or so if we can. So I guess we can call this the lightning round. But, and then there are numerous other bills that I know Sam and Brandon and all their colleagues are working on that are not necessarily on the governor's list that he has prioritized. But let's talk about the vocational training. Jack, he's asking for $25 million for additional vocational training. He's a big believer in that, of course, with his background. They have to have a lot of people in their company that are vocationally trained. What's he specifically trying to do, and how does that look?
I'm so excited about this because it's something the governor campaigned on, and he has tremendous support in the General Assembly for this. And it's a recognition that not every child in Tennessee needs to go to a 4-year college and get a bachelor's degree. Not every child needs to get a master's degree or a PhD. There are many very good paying jobs, important jobs, life-fulfilling jobs that you can get with a wonderful 2-year degree at Columbia State, right here, community college. There are technical certificates that you can get. You can become an EMT, you can become a pipe fitter or a welder or a medical transcriptionist. There are all kinds of jobs. We call them career technical education type courses. Currently in Tennessee, in high school, where there is dual enrollment available, you can take 2 college-level courses while you're in high school that will apply for college credit. Most of those are taken by people who plan to go to a 4-year university. So they take English or they take math. They take classes that will apply towards their general education credits. A very, very small percentage of those take more career technical type courses. That's what Governor Lee wants to focus on, is to make some of that training available so that the real objective here is for those kids who determine, and their parents determine, their path in life is probably not meant to go to a 4-year university, is to make them workforce ready within 1 year of graduating from high school so that they can come out. We've talked about the mechatronics program at Fairview. It's a great example of that. So we're going to expand these dual enrollment courses to make them available. The $25 million is to increase dual enrollment opportunities across the state for more schools to partner, as we do here in Williamson County with Columbia State, to partner with some of these advanced placement type courses. So it's really exciting. It ties right in with Governor Haslam's Drive to 55, which is to recognize that 55% of all jobs in America are going to require some type of post-secondary educational attainment. And we're only at about 37, 38% of Tennesseans that have that. So to be competitive in the world and in the nation, we need more kids. Many go to 4-year college, and that's great. We celebrate that. Many kids do want to go on and get a 4-year degree. But for those that don't, let's give them the skills that they need and the tools that they need to be able to go out and be productive in the workforce. And that's what it's all about.
Criminal justice reform. There's, I think, 2 or 3 or 4 pieces to that, to his efforts there in criminal justice, primarily to decrease recidivism. I think that's the way you say that word. And trying to get the people that are incarcerated back into our system and get them out there successfully. What specifically, what's he trying to do? Brandon, are you?
Yes, I'm on that full committee and criminal justice sub as well. And recidivism, that's the word of the year, I will say, because a year ago I had no idea what that meant, and I hear it at least probably 23 times a day now. Everybody's talking about it. The most compelling data to that is the fact that when you send a non-violent offender to jail, The longer he sits in jail, the more violent he becomes. So you go to jail for not paying moving violations, driving without a license. You stole a $20. I was going to say CD. I don't even know if CDs are still in existence. Okay, well, whatever. You know, some petty, not minor, but some violation of the law. You go to jail. The longer you sit there, the more likely you are to come out and hurt somebody. And those numbers around that, to me, are staggering. And that's where I turned on a dime. Because when I first started hearing this and saw this, I was not very compassionate in the fact that I thought we were letting bad people out of jail. And I'm a little grumpy about that. Because I want bad people to stay in jail and not come out and hurt people. But that's not what we're doing. We're letting, we're putting mechanisms in place, especially around drug issues and opioids and addiction issues, to get people treatment, get them out of the system sooner, put mechanisms in place where they don't get incarcerated, get them back into society, give them mechanisms to have a job, be productive, have good skill training, and keep them out of those institutions, because institutionalizing people and keeping them locked away for nonviolent crimes is not contributing to society in any way, and it is a huge drain on the financial resources of the state. So if we can get them out and monitor them, get them into work programs financially and for the well-being of the community, the data is compelling that this is a great movement, and we're gonna aggressively go down this path.
How much is that effort going to cost? The fiscal note?
A lot. It's expensive in the short term. Long term, financially, it is extremely. I think the numbers are incarceration number per day. Monitoring is about $4 versus keeping them locked up is $71 to $79, I believe. And those are, I'm sorry, we've lots of numbers churning last couple of days, but the number is staggering. If we can get them out, especially if they're working. Especially if they're working, paying taxes, contributing back into the system rather than just purely being a burden.
Just to put all these numbers in perspective, the budget grows a little bit each year just because of our economic growth and the health of our economy here in Tennessee. How much more this year is there to spend? How much more tax money is there to spend than there was last year? Does anybody know that number?
Well, we're just shy of $38 billion.
Total budget, yeah. So the way our budget process, I'll try to make this quick. So the way our process works is we do a budget forecast, or revenue forecast, and that's what we base our budget on. So we have a funding board that's made up of economists, the governor, constitutional officers, and so forth. So they make a prediction as to how much they think our revenue will grow. We get 85% of our revenue from sales tax and franchise and excise tax. Another 15% from other sources of revenue. So they make a prediction. The prediction that we're basing the current budget on is a growth rate of 3.1%. Okay, that's what the projected growth in revenue is for the coming fiscal year. Now, we may grow at 4%, in which case we're going to end the year with a surplus, right? That's a good thing. But if the economy has a hiccup, or we come in at 2.5, then we come in below forecast. So we have to massage those numbers. But when it really comes down to it, and when we talk about some of these funding things, you say a $38 billion budget, oh my goodness, that's so much money. Well, all but about maybe 200 or 300 million of that is pretty well committed. I mean, that's TennCare, K-12 education, corrections, all these big ticket items, roads, you know, we got a dedicated road fund that we only use for roads. So bottom line, the growth is probably about 300 million, okay? And we are over collecting for the current fiscal year. We'll book that as a one-time contribution. And in terms of one-time money, if you hear us talk about recurring dollars, non-recurring dollars, that goes into non-recurring dollars. And then we take that new base and we make a projection for the coming year. Does that make sense? So that's how we do it. We're very conservative in that process. Where states get themselves in trouble is they do we're going to grow at 4.5% next year. And so they base their budget on that. Then they come in at 3%. And they're in a world of hurt, and they end up in a deficit situation. And we do not do that in Tennessee.
And unfortunately, if we miss that projection a little bit, that little bit is not a little bit. That little bit's more in the tune of about $100 million. So we talk about these good programmings and what they cost. So if that projection's not on, and what you're seeing, if you look to Nashville right now, you're noticing a lot of the cranes are coming down. And there is a projection that about 2022, we're going to hit a little plateau. A lot of the forecasting folks and the big developers are saying they're having whispers of pullback. So we're bracing. We had a major contribution into the rainy day fund. State of Tennessee is bracing for pullback because we don't want to overcommit ourselves and get in a situation where we're slashing programming that we've committed to pay for.
And I want to echo that. So yes, Governor Lee has proposed, I think it's, I can't remember the amount, $100-something million contribution to the rainy day fund. That's one-time money to get it to $1.1 billion. That's the highest our rainy day fund. That's our savings account. So if we do come in under projections by a bit and we're $100 million off or $200 million off, we can use that rainy day fund to make up the difference and then correct moving forward. So that puts us in the best fiscal shape we've ever been in as a state.
Yes, but it will be very irresponsible to not hit projections during a good growth period, and we are in that now. So we're bracing, and you know, first day I walked in there, I saw that big surplus, and I saw the projections, and I knew there was good programming out there, and you know, at first look, you see that big surplus, and you want to grab that pretty quick. I mean, Katie Beckett, for instance, I may hit that
right
immediately, but long term, for the good of the state, for our teachers, for our schools, for security for our schools, we have to be very measured.
Yep. Judge Sharon Guffey is with us this morning, or she was. Anderson Cooper. What we're talking about with criminal justice and incarcerating kids and that sort of thing, I know you see both sides of the story every day. Is there any way you can give us a personal opinion about how we balance that in our system?
Well, the juvenile system is much different from the adult system. We're not a punitive system. However, the philosophies with the Juvenile Justice Reform Act that was passed last year is the same, in that if you provide up front the services and treatment that children need, that hopefully that will prevent them from coming into the system. The whole objective now is to keep children from even coming to court and seeing a judge, and rather providing services up front through your staff to do that, which is why the mid-sized counties are struggling a little bit, because that costs a lot of money. But hopefully the benefit is going to be good. You may have heard there's a little uptick in juvenile crime that's got some folks a little nervous. And we're just not quite sure how this is going to play out with JJ reform. There's a time and place to keep children detained in order to protect the public. So it's a pretty tricky balancing act. I guess one of the questions that I have in terms of adult criminal justice reform is, are we talking about programs in all of our prisons, or just state-run prisons, or, I mean, is it the private prisons as well? Because that has been challenging to provide those rehabilitative efforts in private prisons.
Gentlemen, response?
The consensus is that expanding programming throughout the whole system would be the best option. However, it's back to the fiscal note and what we can afford and how they allocate the funding. There is a, how do I say this? There's a bit of pushback and allocating a whole lot of funding towards the criminal justice system when we still have challenges within our education system with children. So not that we always weigh and balance, but when you're allocating funding, you do have to pick and choose and prioritize where that money goes.
Time for one more. Mindy, you're always good for a question. Mindy Tate, Franklin tomorrow.
Thank you. Brandon, you just mentioned that looks like the cranes are coming down some in Nashville, but Nashville and Williamson County have experienced tremendous growth and job growth over the last few years, and it's been a boon to our economy. Those jobs mean people, and those people need places to live. A few years ago, the legislature took away one of the tools that was looking at inclusionary zoning, which would allow or have built tools in giving local government the chance to require types of housing in their new developments. It's a tool. Are there other tools that we can look to provide housing, not just for the new people coming to our community, but the people that are living here and want to move up, want to change their circumstance? When we have tools that we can use that are taken away, how can we deal with the growth here, the issues of homelessness, and trying to break the cycle of poverty and get people out of public situation and moving up?
Well, we know for a fact that the most expensive places to live in this nation is where there is the tightest government controls on mandates on housing, be it rent controls, be it mandatory zoning. So you look at New York City, San Francisco, Honolulu, by far the most expensive places. They have strict control over the market, the free market, and that drives up the cost of housing. So the state, realizing what drives up the cost, we said, now locals, you can't do something that drives up the very thing you're trying to defend. So what drives up the cost of housing is the cost of the lot, development. The thing that we enjoy in this county so much is the strict planning and zoning codes on us, because it allows our housing to go up so much. But if you wanted to get affordable housing, you greatly increase the density and take away the mandates on the free market that says you got to do X, Y, and Z before you can build. That is the simplest and most direct way to get affordable housing. There's a reason why housing is so much cheaper in a county that has very little zoning and planning. But most Williamson Countyans like that strict. They don't want a trailer beside their 5,000 square foot home. So it's give and take, and it deserves an honest discussion. I appreciate your leadership on that, Mindy, and you leading that discussion on where's the balance.
And knowing you and knowing you well and knowing the condition of your heart, I trust where you're at. However, this is the field that I work in, and I work for developers, and I understand the business very, very well. To some degree, affordable housing is not affordable housing. It's nothing more than a marketing and branding ploy to bust your density restrictions wide open. And you start with that, you lead with that, you sell that, you say we need housing for teachers, first responders, the poorest in our community, and then you build flats that are $500 a square foot once those are approved. So it starts off as being affordable housing. What it turns into is high density, more growth, more traffic, and more return for investors and contractors who put projects together. So I'm a little, I guess
you're grumpy this
I am grumpy. Well, I work in the business. I know how this is done, and I've seen it done in communities all over the country. And I saw it done outside of Texas, in Atlanta, 400 North, and I saw it done outside of. Those are projects that I worked on 20 years ago, and it's decimated communities.
We've got to wind this up, gentlemen. We really appreciate y'all taking the time to be out here. This understanding that we get from these conversations is invaluable, and we really appreciate your joining us. Lots more to cover. Hope you'll all be back next month. There's tons of other bills like the Medicaid block grant efforts going on, the abortion efforts going on. Lots of things that our viewers probably would like to hear your comments on. So we look forward to being back next month on the last Friday of the month. Lots of people to thank for making this happen every morning. Dr. Janet Smith and Dr. Darrell Lampley and Columbia State, we really appreciate this beautiful place that you let us have this, and all that you do for the community in addition to that. Our corporate sponsors, Vanderbilt, with Lynn Maddox and Dennis Wagner with AT&T and a little company called Aspen Grove Asset Management that puts it on the radio. Creed Henderson and the TV crew from WCTV, they make us look a lot better than we deserve every month, and we appreciate that. Tom Lawrence and WAKM gets us on the air there. And the chamber staff led by Kel, and he's pointing to the coffee. The community coffee people are invaluable part of this whole process, or we would not be able to keep our eyes open here every morning. So the community coffee people, we are so thankful for that. And there was somebody else. Hey, thank you, Don. Don provided pastries this morning. We appreciate that. But the chamber staff, personal thanks to Nancy Conway for giving me this job many years ago, and we have a lot of fun with it, learn a lot every month, and just appreciate the opportunity to do this. So any comments or questions, please let us know, and we look forward to seeing you back next month. Thank you very much.